Okay, we're live. In wait. 1 second. Okay, we're live. I think.
Live? It says webinar is now streaming live on Facebook.
Okay, great. We're live.
Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Malvika, and with me I have Shanotra Kumar. Today we're going to talk to you about the mental health law in India, and I understand this has been a topic of discussion quite recently. So let's look into various aspects of the law, and you can leave your questions if you have any. So, mental health and law intersect in a multitude of ways, especially understanding the health conditions that a person is going through to see whether that person has a legal capacity to make a decision is exactly where mental health and law actually intersect. And the law has also specified certain terminology in terms of how we refer to patients suffering from mental illnesses. For example, insanity is now termed under the Mental Health Care Act as mental disorder, and lunatic is not used anymore. Instead, it's referred to as persons with mental illness. And all this is given in the Mental Health Care Act 2017. The Rajya Sabha passed this in August 2016, and the Lok Sabha passed this in March 2017. It basically is a law that gives the right to access mental health care in India for anyone. It does not discriminate in any way, and it also seeks to comply with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. So, all the rights that you have under this law will be explained in detail soon. But before that, let me just give a quick summary of what the law actually entails. So when we look at what is mental health care, it is an analysis or diagnosis of a person who has mental illness or is suspected of having mental illnesses. And mental illness is also defined under the law very, very particularly. It says that mental illness is a substantial disorder of thinking, mood, perception, orientation, or memory that grossly impairs judgment or behavior or any capacity to recognize reality or any ability of a person to meet the ordinary demands of life. Now, mental health conditions are also associated with abuse of alcohol and drugs, but mental illness is very different from mental retardation, because mental retardation is a condition of an arrested or incomplete development of a mind of a person, and that does not fall under the definition of mental illness. And there are many examples of mental illnesses, for example schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, substance abuse disorders. All of these are examples. And if you want to see the list of mental illnesses, you can check out the International Classification of Disease on the WHO website. This is where a lot of the determination of the mental illnesses happen. And when a mental health professional actually determines whether you have a mental illness or not, there are certain factors which are not considered and should not be considered under the law. Some of them are whether you've received past treatment, your political views, your whether you conform to certain society norms in terms of religion, morals, belief, whether you belong to any religious group, etc., and your whether you have a certain political inclination, and any other reason that is not related directly to your mental health care is not a reason to determine mental illnesses. So when a mental health professional is actually diagnosing you, these are not reasons on which he or she would actually say that you are suffering from mental disorder, illness, for that matter. Now, let's look at what are the rights you have basically in terms of accessing mental health care. Now, this is one of the main rights that are there under the mental health law. So, you can actually approach any government funded institution which provides acute mental health care services like outpatient or inpatient services. If you Google mental health clinics, you'll get a list of them. And apart from that, you can also approach halfway homes which are these temporary facilities for people who don't want to go back to their family or are not ready to go back to their family. You can approach sheltered accommodations and supported accommodations. Supported accommodations are those where caretakers are also there. There may be a few agencies which also provide such services. You can also request home based rehabilitation where you have a caretaker actually coming and taking care of you at home. There are hospitals, child mental health services, and old age mental health services centers that you can directly approach. And these are places you can actually go to access mental health care. You can also go to a hospital and ask them to direct you to the nearest medical clinics also. That is one of the steps you can take. Now, Shanotra will take you through all the rights under the Act.
So before we move on to the rights, I mean, there are only a certain category of people who you can approach as like who are mental healthcare professionals who you can approach for accessing services. Now, if you want the list of these professionals, we have a detailed a list on our website. But just to give you an overview, there are three kinds of professionals who you can approach to access mental health care services. The first one would be a psychiatric social worker. Then the second one would be a professional registered with the relevant state medical authority, mental health authority, or it could be a person with certain required educational backgrounds that are mentioned in the law. Now, as I said, our website has detailed information on what qualifications are required for such persons, and you can read them to ensure that you're approaching the right mental health professional. Now, moving on to the rights that you have as a person accessing mental healthcare services. These basically are like a big there are certain ones that are generally guaranteed to you as being a person, like a person, not just anyone accessing healthcare, but in general. um, Basically, like, to start off, like the specific ones, the first one would be the right to make an advance directive. Now, an advance directive is a mandate or a legal document that specifies a person's preference for treatment should they lose their capacity to make treatment decisions in the future. Now, it is an important tool to maintain a patient's autonomy in the decision making process as to what treatment should be applied to them. Now, this advance directive would come into force when someone no longer has the capacity to make healthcare decisions for themselves. But once the person regains this ability, the directive ceases to be operational. Now, so the idea for an advance directive is derived from the UN Convention that Malvika just mentioned, the Convention on Rights for Persons with Disability, where the impetus is actually given on promoting the principles of participation and non-discrimination in patient care. Now, this advanced directive document covers two things. The first one is your directions for treatment, basically how you wish to be treated and what needs to be what treatment were to apply to you. And the second is the name of a nominated representative. Now, a nominated representative is a person who you appoint to discharge certain duties, where when you become incapable of doing it yourself owing to your mental illness. I'll explain this in a bit in detail, but just to go over, there are two things, two important things that are mentioned in your advance directive is the directions for your treatment and the name of your nominated representative. Now, one important thing to note here is that only persons above the age of 18 can make an advance directive. Now, a minor cannot do this. Such decisions for minor are generally taken by their parents or guardian. Now, another thing to note is that the advance directive can be overridden by a doctor in case of certain emergency situations, but only upon the prior approval of your nominated representatives. Now, such immediate intervention by a doctor against your treatment plan laid down in your directive can only be done in three circumstances. One, to prevent you from certain death or harm to you. Second would be to prevent you from inflicting serious harm to yourself or to others around you. And the third would be in case you are damaging property that either belongs to you or someone else. So as you can see, this advance directive is a very important document to have when you are accessing mental health care. While making this document for yourself, make sure that you approach the services of an NGO working in this field or a lawyer to ensure that your wishes in terms of treatment are properly conveyed in the document. Now, the next slide that you have is the right to appoint a nominated representative who's going to discharge certain functions for you for the period when you are not able to make mental health care decisions for yourself. Now, as I said, the law clearly lays down certain duties that can be discharged by this person. So, first and foremost is that they have to ensure that your treatment decisions from your advance directive are being followed properly, like they're being carried out in the manner that you laid down. Now, the benefit of appointing a nominated representative is that the representative can ensure certain wishes, like your, say, medical and family history, your values, your cultural background, and your best interest is given consideration while your treatment is being executed. Now, this person can also like assist you in terms of admission and discharge from a mental health care institution. A full list of these duties has been provided on our website, nyaya.org, and you can go through them in detail there. You can like click on the mental health laws section, and you will have a list of the duties of, like that the nominated representative has to do when you appoint him. Now, while appointing this person, like a person as a nominated representative, there are certain things that you must ensure. Like, first is that this person is a major, like he's above the age of 18. Then, second, that they are competent to discharge their duties, like the duties that are mentioned in the law. And third is that they give you their consent in writing to be appointed as a nominated representative. So it's not just that someone you can just randomly say that, oh, this person is going to be my nominated representative. They also have to agree to be your representative in certain circumstances. In case you don't have a nominated representative or you've not appointed someone, a relative or a caregiver can act as one. Now, a person can also be appointed by the Mental Health Review Board as your representative. Then the law also provides for the director of Department of Social Welfare or any of their representatives to be appointed as a nominated representative for you. Now, we've covered the most two important ones. One is your right to make an advance directive, and the second one was your right to appoint a nominated representative. The third right that is available under the Mental Health Care Act of 2017 is your right to community living. Now, every person with a mental illness has a right to live with the society or is a part of a society or a community. In case a person has no family or is homeless, it does not mean that the person will be institutionalized in a mental health care establishment. In such cases, the mentally ill person has been like who has been abandoned by his family or cannot live with his family or in a community. In such cases, it is the duty of the government to to ensure that you get appropriate support, like legal aid, like community based establishment, the group housings that Malvika had mentioned, halfway house, and so on. Now, it may be a different issue that some realities starkly differ from what the letter of the law actually is. However, it is important to note that people with mental illnesses or accessing mental health care have as much as a right to live and be a part of a society as any other person. Now, this leads me to to the next right that's provided in the Mental Health Care Act is the right to live with dignity. Now, every person with a mental illness has a right to live with dignity and to be protected from any cruel, degrading, or inhuman treatment in any mental health care establishment. Now, this right also includes the right to live in a safe and hygienic environment, which means like the mental health care establishment that you are at, they are duty bound to ensure that you get a safe and hygienic environment. They must also ensure that you have access to leisure and recreational facilities, have your right to privacy, have like proper food, proper clothing, and other such rights. Now, a detailed list of this is also given on our website. You can have like go on to www.nyaya.org and see a detailed list of the facilities that are to be given to you as your in order to ensure that your right to live with dignity is fully complied with. Now, Malvika will take you over some more rights in cases of confidentiality and legal aid that I had mentioned. And to you.
So, when it comes to confidentiality, all patients diagnosed with mental illnesses or suspected to have mental illnesses have the right to have their information kept private. So this applies to any form of mental health care, just like it would for any form of physical health care. For example, if you're going through a surgery and you want to keep all your details private, the same thing would apply to someone who may have a bipolar disorder and wants to keep their details private. So the mental health practitioner basically has a lot of burden regarding confidentiality. They have a duty to keep all the information private. They have a duty to get informed consent in case they want to share it. And when it comes to sharing information with the media, it is prohibited unless informed consent is taken from the patient itself. Now, sometimes under the law, they've given certain conditions under which information is allowed to be released. Let's look at what they are. So, as Shanotra has mentioned about the nominated representative in detail, so, if information has to be given to the nominated representative to enable him to fulfill his duties, it is allowed. Then, if one medical health practitioner wants to give information to another doctor or another medical health practitioner for treatment and care, even in that situation, information sharing is allowed. And if it's necessary to protect any other person from harm or violence, or necessary to protect the interest or security of the state, in such situations, the mental health practitioner has a duty to report to the relevant authorities. And if in case there's an order from the Supreme Court, High Court, or the Mental Health Review Board, or an authority, then also the details can be furnished. Now, when I say information, it does not just mean books and documents, etc. It also includes all forms of electronic information, including all databases. Any information is covered under this right. So there is a right to confidentiality. Now, when it comes to right to legal aid, that to free legal aid, this means that you can access legal services free of cost. Some examples of that are you can be represented by a lawyer for situations, payment of costs for process fees, etc. All of that is done by the legal aid centers, etc. And any person diagnosed with a mental illness has a right to ask for legal aid, and the police, magistrate, and the mental health professional or the medical officer has a duty to let the person know that there is a concept known as free legal aid and that they have a right to it. Now, legal aid itself is a very big topic, and I don't want to go into it right now. So you can check out more on our legal aid topic on our website. Another right, which is very important and talked about nowadays, is the right to equality and non-discrimination of patients with mental illnesses and persons with mental illnesses and persons accessing mental health care. So they cannot, under the law, it's very clear, you cannot be discriminated on the basis of sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, caste, religion, etc. You cannot be discriminated on any basis. And when it comes to facilities that you can actually access, you have a right to get all facilities. Like any person with a mental illness or any person who's accessing mental health care can get all facilities, including emergency treatment, ambulances, any kind of hospital conditions, good living conditions, and any other thing that's provided for persons who are admitted in hospitals. So the rights are very similar and are supposed to be the same, even if like a person who has a mental has to be the same for a person who has mental illness versus a person who does not. So this is very important, and it's very important for hospitals and medical health practitioners to ensure this. Now, Shanotra will take you through some more rights.
So just to cover two more that are covered under this law is one is your right to communication and the second is your right to information. Now under communication, what it means is that when you are admitted to a mental health care institution or an establishment, you have the right to either receive or refuse visitors phone calls and emails. This means that people, you not only have your right, it's not like a prison where you are like, your rights are curtailed and you don't have access to services. You can, depending on the rules of the mental health care establishment, you can of course like receive phone calls, you can receive visitors, you can have like your family and friends visit you, and you can even like have exchange emails with them, have access to internet services. Now the thing is, as I said, it's this right to receive also includes the right to refuse. Now if you don't want to see someone, if you don't want visitors, you can always like tell your mental health care professional that you are not like willing to meet people while your treatment is going on, and they have to carry out your wishes accordingly. But you have to note that this does not mean that you can refuse to meet your nominated representative or the medical professionals or people or some authorities mentioned under the law. Those people you have to meet because as a part of your treatment plan. But in case of others like visitors and families and friends, you have an option to decide how who you want to communicate with and who you don't. It's an integral part of what are the rights that are of the rights that are given to you under the law. Now, the second one that I mentioned was the right to information. Now, every person with a mental illness or their nominated representative have the right to access like information from a mental health care professional. Now, this includes information like the laws that are applicable to a person like with a mental illness who is being admitted, then the criteria for like under which they are being like the criteria and the conditions under which they are being admitted, then information regarding making an application to the mental health review board for such admission. If you think that this admission is not being done lawfully, you can go ahead, like you have the right to go ahead and get information from the mental health review board. Then there's also information relating to your treatment plan and the possible side effects of your treatment plan. This is something that is very important. And also like you should have access to available information on your available medical records. In certain cases the mental health institutions or the establishments might not give you access to your medical records. You can always file an application with the mental health review board and get access to these, but they in certain cases they have the right to resolve certain of the records if they feel that it might be detrimental to the treatment plan. Now finally you also have the right to complain under this law. Like in case a person accessing mental health care services or the nominated representative, like they feel that the care provided to them in the establishment has been deficient, or the treatment or any other related services have not been in accordance to law, or have like caused grave like injury to a person who is accessing such mental health services, they can go ahead and file a complaint. Either you can first complain to the head of the establishment. If you're not happy with the response that you receive from the head of the establishment, you can file a complaint with the mental health review board. If you're not satisfied with the results of the review board also, then you can approach the state mental health authority established under the act. Now, one important thing to note is that you can also approach the court if any of these rights that we mentioned today get violated. Now, the Mental Health Care Act provides punishment for professionals and establishments who violate these basic rights afforded to those who are accessing treatment for mental health care. The punishment for this is 6 months imprisonment and or a fine, which can go up to 10,000 or even both. For repeat offenders, the punishment is higher, where you get a jail time of up to 2 years, or a fine which can be anywhere between 50,000 to 2 lakh. Now, Malvika will walk you over some of the procedures that are prohibited and give you some context related to the COVID situation or like COVID related context.
Yeah. So when it comes to prohibited procedures, the law is very clear on some procedures that are prohibited on persons accessing mental health care or persons with mental illnesses. One of them is known as psychosurgery, which is basically surgery of a person's neurological system, like, for example, the brain. And but the law also says that this particular procedure can be done with the informed consent of the patient and if the medical health review board allows for it. So there will be certain reasons why such a step would be necessary and the medical health review board would allow it. But again, at the end of the day, the consent, informed consent of the person is required. Then there is electroconvulsive therapy, which is basically when you pass electrical currents through a person's brain without muscle relaxants or anesthesia. So in such situations, um, in such situations when it comes to children, basically if the psychiatrist of the minor feels it is necessary and if there's permission of the guardian and there is permission from the medical healthcare board, then only can this procedure be done on children. When it comes to adults above the age of 18, this procedure cannot be done on them. Then sterilization, which is basically surgery which makes a person incapable of reproduction. This is not allowed. Chaining is not allowed in any way, any form of restraint, basically. And there has been quite a lot of discussion on conversion therapy, which is basically an attempt to change a person's sexual orientation, sexual identity, or gender expression. Now, even though this is not expressly prohibited under the law, the Indian Association of Clinical Psychologists had put out a statement last month saying that this is an extremely dangerous form of procedure to be conducted on people and that they don't condone it. So now let me go on to something very important regarding the cost of mental health care services. Now, whenever you approach these government-funded mental health care services, all the medicines that you have are free of cost. So, if you want to find out what all medicines are free of cost, you can check this list known as the Essential Drug List. You can go to this website nhp.gov.in, which provides for all the list of free medicines, and people who are homeless or below the poverty line can get free mental health care also under the law. Now, COVID has been quite a stressful situation for many people. So, to tackle the mental health care aspect of it, the government has launched a helpline for behavioral and psychological support. The number is 08046110007. So, apart from this, there's also an advisory called Minding Our Minds During COVID-19, which they've put up on the Ministry of Family and Health website, family and welfare website. It has tips on how to handle stress and how to handle any mental health problems that you may be facing during this time. So this is one way you can actually approach government services during this time, because we're all stuck within our houses during the lockdown, and in particularly in containment zones now. So if there are any other questions on mental health care or on any aspects of the law, please do drop a comment. If you want to keep your question private, you can also ask on Ask Nyaya, which is a particular feature we have on our website. Please check out the topic of mental health on our website, www.nyaya.org. And thank you for joining both of us today.